You're listening to Release Your Resistance with Bex Beltran, episode 74. Welcome to Release Your Resistance. This is Bex. The only reason why any of us don't have what we want in life is because of our own resistance. Right now, I'm learning how to recognize and release my resistance, and this podcast tells you how you can release your resistance so that you can live the exact life that you want. Let's get started. Years ago, when I was studying adult education in school, I learned about the adult learning theory. Have you heard of this? It basically differentiates the ways and reasons how and why adults learn in contrast to how children learn. To summarize in the most simplistic terms, as adults, we want to be motivated to learn something and believe there is a reason to learn it. We want to know that whatever we are learning is applicable to our personal situation and that knowing it will help us somehow. And we want our learning to be self-directed and to take into account our own experiences. Today, I want to share with you my favorite ways to learn new things as an adult. In thinking about how I have learned things, I realized I usually use 4 main methods to learn and gain confidence in a new skill or topic, no matter what it is. What have I made the conscious decision to learn as an adult? Just because I wanted to, just because it sparked my interest, or I was curious about it, or I thought there would be some benefit to me. One of the earliest examples that I can recall was in my early 20s, I decided that I would learn to speak Portuguese. There's a whole backstory to that and the process by which I learned Portuguese. It just unfolded so naturally, so that is kind of a fun story. Let me know if you want to hear the whole thing, maybe in a future episode or maybe over a lunch or a coffee one day. But this Portuguese language example was over 20 years ago and well before I was into personal development and self-awareness, and certainly before I learned the adult learning theory. But even now, I can look back and see some elements of how I used, even back then, my current favorite ways to learn. More recently, a couple of years ago, when I was first getting interested in business and entrepreneurship, I wanted a website. So I decided I would learn how to build my own website. So all of the methods that I'm describing to you today, I used for my website learning. Another example that I've already talked about a few times is how I learned tarot. As I was thinking about my favorite ways to learn, I saw, again, that I used each of these methods when I taught myself tarot. And finally, this year, the one that I am currently in is my own study of surrender. As I talk about these 4 learning methods, I will share how I used or am currently using the methods in my own learning. What about you? What have you decided to learn as an adult? Or what are you thinking you would love to learn? Maybe some of my favorite ways of learning will work for you. I love to visualize things. As I was thinking about this topic and how I love to learn, I thought of, like I mentioned, 4 different methods. So then I put them into a visual metaphor. I thought of a Venn diagram. And whenever I think of a Venn diagram, I usually just think of 2 overlapping circles with that overlapped area that kind of makes an oval in the middle. I don't normally visualize 4 overlapping circles or more than that even. So because of today's example, I looked online for an image of a 4-circle Venn diagram just to kind of give my brain an idea of what it would look like. And I loved it. Okay, first of all, it kind of looks like a flower with those 4 circles. And secondly, as the 4 circles overlap with each other, that middle area creates an oval with sections inside of the oval. So it creates what looks like, to me, an eye, like the eye in your head, on your face, where you see things. That was so interesting. My brain went off in a whole other direction. Envisioning that eye made me think, oh wow, learning and loving to learn gives you vision. It gives you clarity. It's a new perspective. And all of this is true. So I am very excited to tell you my 4 main methods of how I love to learn. And I'm curious if you will use these for yourself, or if you already do use them, or if you have other ways that you love to learn that you would include in your Venn diagram. And maybe your diagram has more than 4 circles and makes an even more elaborate flower and eye. The reason why I thought it was so helpful to put it in a Venn diagram instead of in a list is because I don't know that these methods have to be chronological. I don't know that one has to be or happen before the other. I think in some cases they can and do go in a specific order, but I don't think prerequisites are always necessary in learning. So one of my methods of how I love to learn is taking a deep dive. The way that I do this is I search for videos on YouTube and other sources. I look for books. I listen to podcasts. I sign up for courses. I dive into the topic as deeply as I can. When I find a lot of videos that really seem interesting to me, but I just don't have the time, or I'm just not in the space that I want to sit and passively watch videos, sometimes I'll add them to my watch later list on YouTube. That's a nice little feature where you can just mark something as watched later, and then the videos will be all queued up for you whenever you want to watch them. I've also made playlists for myself of videos that I want to come back to. That way they're not mixed in with a generic watch later list. I put the specific videos into a specific list about the topic that I want to dive into. And I do the same thing with podcasts. When I find a podcast I want to listen to later, I just download it onto my podcast app on my phone, and that way when I'm driving or doing a chore or a task, or if I'm walking and I have the ability to listen, then I can go into my app and pull up all of those episodes that I saved so that I can listen to them when I have time. As soon as I hear about a book recommendation that's interesting to me, my usual first step is to look for it in the Overdrive library app, because I love listening to books rather than reading them with my eyes, especially nonfiction. So I will look in the app to see if that book is available from the library. And if it is, I'll get it immediately. And if it's not currently available, I'll add it to my holds so that as soon as it does become available, I get a notification and then I can listen to it. And this has just worked so well for me because sometimes I will get slightly interested in a topic. So I'll go and I'll find the different sources, the videos, the podcasts, the books, the online courses. But if a book is not immediately available, I'll just hold it. I'll put it on my holds for later, and I'll just keep learning from the other sources that I'm collecting. And then the book always pops up as available at the best time. I mean, the timing is always 100% perfect. When it pops up for me, it's when I needed a refresher, or when I finally have time to listen to it, or when I need a break from something else that I'm listening to or working on. And it always turns out that now is the perfect time to learn about this topic that I was interested in before when I put the book on hold. Another trick that I use to get books if they're not immediately available to me is to become a member, or I am a member, of multiple library systems. So if I don't see a book that I want in my usual library, I will hunt for it in other libraries. And oftentimes that does the trick, and I am able to find the book right when I want it. And if it's not available in the library and I really don't want to wait and put it on hold, I will go ahead and get the book through my Audible account. I still pay for audiobooks, even though I borrow most of the books I listen to for free from the library, but I also still have an Audible subscription as well. So videos, podcasts, and books and courses are how I usually take a deep dive into learning a new topic. Referring back to the examples I mentioned of things that I've learned as an adult, When I decided to learn Portuguese, one of the many things that I did, one of the methods that I used was that I signed up for lessons at a language school near my house. And for the website building learning, I attended WordCamp, which is a conference for people who use the WordPress website building software. Another circle on my Venn diagram of methods that I love to use to learn is to plan and project. Okay, so I debated what to name this method because it's plan and project. But then that's like a noun and a verb together, and why can't they both be nouns, or why couldn't they both be verbs? And it doesn't seem symmetrical this way. Plus, please note that the word project can also be a verb, like to project something. And that's not what I mean at all. So maybe I need a little bit more work on the title of this method. But what I mean by plan and project is that I plan how I will apply what I am learning. And if I'm really taking it to the next level, I make a project about it. So plan and project. So one example that you probably already heard me talking about if you followed along with this podcast is when I decided to learn tarot. I had a plan that I would really become familiar so that I would never have to look up a meaning in a book, and so that I would always feel confident when I did a reading. So part of the plan as I was learning tarot is that I spent every lunch hour, this was back while I was still working at a corporate job, I spent every lunch hour studying tarot. I was either watching an online course or reading a book or watching a YouTube video. I really had a pretty vast personalized curriculum that I charted out for myself. And part of my plan was that I would spend some of those lunch hours making flashcards for myself and then quizzing myself on the card meetings. Making and using flashcards is a great learning technique. So depending on what you want to learn, part of your learning plan may include flashcards. Then the project that I created for myself around learning tarot was the 100 reading project that I talked to you about in the Magic of Massive Action episode a few weeks ago. Another example of how I have used this plan and project method to learn was this year when I decided I was going to take a deep dive into the topic of surrender. I am still deep in my dive right now. So I started out by reading a lot of books, listening to a lot of podcasts, and then going down rabbit holes. One teacher would lead me to another teacher who led me to the next. And then I decided my project would be a surrender study group. So that is what I started in March of 2021. I just put the call out on social media and amongst people that I know, and I said, hey, I'm loving this specific book, and I am reading all about surrender, and I would love to talk to someone else who has read this book or who wants to read it. I want to dive in even deeper, one chapter at a time, over the span of 8 weeks. And so that's what I did. I created a study group, and about 100 people came together in the Facebook group in March and April, and every week about 10 to 12 of us would meet on Zoom. We talked about the book and our own perspectives and our experiences, and that was just such a great project. It led to some really interesting connections with people that I didn't know before. And of course, it got me deeper into the topic of surrender. So plan and project is my second circle in my Love to Learn Venn diagram. And the description of that project leads me to the next circle. The third circle or method is other people. Another way that I love to learn is to find other people who know about the topic or who are interested in the topic or who are also currently learning the same topic. I just gave that example with surrender, how I pulled together my own study group. And in the past, as I've learned other topics and become interested in and fascinated by other things that I want to learn, I have attended meetups, I have joined Facebook groups or created my own. I have attended lectures and classes and seminars and conferences, anything to put me in contact with other people who I can learn from and with. And I also notice I tend to tune in to whatever that topic is in even my regular everyday conversations when I'm not in learning mode. My topic will seem to come up more frequently when I talk with people. Or another way I might notice it with other people is if someone else says something that's very tangential, I might even ask, hey, do you know about this topic? And I just seem to be a little bit more tuned in to whatever my topic is that I am excited by and that I'm passionate about. And actually, most likely, I will probably bring it up in conversations to hear if any other people are interested in it like I am. So an example of that one was years back, I got interested in the idea of travel hacking. Do you know what this is? Travel hacking is a way to travel and get upgrades at a very low cost through creatively collecting and combining credit card and frequent flyer points. So as soon as I heard about travel hacking, I was captivated. I signed up for an online course to learn how to do it, and I found an online Facebook group where people talked about travel hacking and what their experiences were and how they did it. And because I wanted to have this experience of talking to other people in person about this new favorite topic of mine, I recruited my friends to become interested in travel hacking so that I would have someone close by and familiar that we could bounce ideas off of. I wanted to hear their experiences and their perspectives. So I remember telling my friend about it, and I was super excited. And whenever I am very excited about anything, I become very enthusiastic. So that could both be a blessing or a curse or both or neither. I don't know. But anyhow, I was telling my friend about it, and she kind of dismissed it a little bit. She said, well, that's nice, but it wouldn't work for her. The idea of travel hacking wasn't really aligned with her personal goals for herself. And she was very skeptical, and she actually had some firm beliefs against opening up credit cards to creatively use those points and miles. But somehow, I don't know what I said or did, she did agree to watch the course with me that I had signed up for. So we started watching this course together, and she ended up joining the Facebook group, and she took off. She mastered travel hacking. She and her husband took some amazing trips for not a lot of money, and she totally dove in. And the funniest thing to me is that I didn't end up taking advantage of travel hacking nearly as much as she did, but I still did learn so much about it. Referring back to the other examples of what I've learned, one of the reasons that I decided to learn Portuguese back over 20 years ago was because I was spending a lot of time with Portuguese speakers. So at that time, it was easy for me to practice and to overhear native conversations. And attending WordCamp that I mentioned for learning how to build a website was a great place to meet other people who were also learning at the same time that I was. The fourth method that I use for learning could actually be two methods in one, but I am still just using it as one circle in my Venn diagram. So maybe it's like a coin that has two sides. One side of the coin is obsession and immersion. I just described how I become super enthusiastic, another word for this is obsessed, about my learning topic, and then I can't help but tell my friends and recruit them. I learn really well when I get obsessed by a topic. Then nothing holds me back from learning, and I immerse myself in that topic. An example of this is when there is a book that's helping me learn, I will read the book and then immediately reread it again when I finish. I will read it in multiple formats, so I will listen to it while I walk or drive, and then I'll have the physical copy at home as well that I can go back to and underline things or reread parts. And I look up the author on social media, and then I'll search for videos and podcast episodes where that author appeared. I will read reviews of the book in question to see what other readers compare it to so that I can find even more sources to dive deep into. Talk about obsession, right? I think about the topic all the time. I immerse myself in it. I write about it as I journal. I talk about it to people all the time. So this is an example of my own personal obsessive immersion. I really just drop myself right into the topic so that I can feel it, smell it, taste it, touch it, hear it, everything. Now, you may have thought that last one was the two sides of the coin because I used two words, obsess and immerse. But no, the other side of this fourth circle, this fourth method in the Venn diagram, is teaching. One of my favorite beliefs is that the best way to learn something is to teach it. This method of learning might not be for everyone, which is why I'm keeping it as just like an alternate version of obsession and immersion. If I want to learn something, I try to figure out how I can teach it to someone else because I know when I teach, my mind goes to work trying to organize and simplify and come up with metaphors and come up with examples and think about how I would describe this to someone else so that they could learn it. This podcast is an example of me learning something even better by teaching it. Pretty much every single concept that I have shared with you over the past year and a half is something that I did learn or I want to learn for myself. Or it could be something that I feel like I have mastered up to this point and it's just too good not to share with you. So for everything that I've been sharing with you on this podcast, most likely I got curious about it. There was some kind of spark or interest. I took a deep dive. I read multiple books. I made a plan for how I would apply what I learned. Maybe I created a project. I found other people who love and talk about the topic. And now I am learning by teaching to you through the podcast. For the surrender example, the next portion of the Venn diagram that I am focusing on this summer is teaching a surrender course so that I can teach what I have learned so far and what I am continuing to learn to other people who may not have read the same books yet or who may not have ever even been exposed to the concept of surrender. So now let's focus on you. As I was describing all of my methods and examples, did you pick up on anything familiar to you? Do we have any learning methods in common? Or have I missed any really, really good learning methods? And now that you have heard about them, do you think that you will try 1 or 2 or 4 of these methods for yourself? How can you imagine yourself deeply diving into a new topic? What learning plan could you create for yourself? Or would you create a project for yourself to apply what you're learning? How can you find other people who have learned or who are learning what you are interested in? Can you imagine yourself becoming obsessive about a topic in a good way? How can you immerse yourself into your topic? Would you ever consider teaching it to someone else? As with so many things these days, I have created a workbook that you can use if you want to try out my methods for yourself. It's a Love to Learn workbook that lets you collect your notes and action items from all of your learning resources in one place. Plus, it lets you track your learning progress. So you can get a link to this workbook in the show notes for this episode at bexb.org/learn, Learn. And leave me a comment there as well to share any questions or maybe some resistance that might have come up for you as you were listening today. Or you can always send me an email at hi@bexb.org. Thank you so much for listening today. Happy learning, and I will talk to you next week. This has been Release Your Resistance. Thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, make sure you're subscribed and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Also, think about someone who you know who would love this episode and share it with them. There should be a share button on your app if you're listening to this on your phone. If you'd like to continue this conversation one-on-one or in real time, come visit me on my site at bexb.org to see how we can work together.